Welcome to the Soilcraft Regen Agronomy Podcast. At Soilcraft, our mission is to innovate and lead in the field of regenerative agronomy, forging a path that empowers farmers to produce food that nourishes and heals both the planet and its inhabitants.
Welcome to this Regen Weekly podcast, except for it's kind of like a Regen monthly, every 2 weeks, sometimes weekly. Anyways, look, we're doing our best, but thanks for joining us. We're continuing on in our series, talking about a different way to discuss kind of diseases categorically. We can even do pests, but look, why are we spending so much time going through this? And that's a great question, if that's the question you're asking. And the answer I would put forth to you is that diseases are not a must, are they? You don't have to have diseases. Wouldn't you agree, Trent?
To a certain extent, yes. Unfortunately.
Come on, you were supposed to say yes. You were supposed to say, I totally agree.
Oh, it never works out as good as we hope. Unfortunately, we're living under, what's the term the Bible uses? We're living under a curse.
Yeah.
Since Adam. So we have all these issues we have to deal with. But the caveat is there are so many things that we can do to drastically reduce those issues if we try to mimic the creation and follow its design. But when we go against that design, we have more issues and we wonder why. So that's what we're here to discuss.
But I mean, we talk about that often. If you go to a pristine wilderness place, the bush or the forest or, the mountains, okay, it's not perfect, but, so many of those spaces, like they're not, you don't see disease spreading rapidly or at large. You'll see disease here, disease there, one plant, whatever. And that's because it's a balanced ecosystem, right? And so, get rid of that sunshine beaming in there.
Super bright.
And so, but that's what we want to discuss is, what we want to discuss today in this Regen episode is we want to discuss a disease, well, two diseases specifically, Rhizoctonia solani and Pythium, SPP, Pythium. They're really both pretty nasty, and they're kind of strange. Because Rhizoctonia is a fungus. It's a Basidiomycetes, which, what does that mean? Well, there's no spores. It has these other things that it uses, these sclerotia that it uses instead of spores. And Pythium has oomycetes, and it's actually more of a water mold. But they're strange critters, but, one of the things they both have in common is they tend to love cold, waterlogged soils. So categorically, and that can happen. I mean, as much as we try to prevent it, we end up with cold, wet conditions. So we want to discuss, what we can do to avoid that. But one of the big ideas is that these diseases don't just appear out of nowhere, right? We create the environment they need, whether we know it or not, and we can just as easily create the environment that shuts them down or makes it very unpleasant for them. So that Rhizoctonia solani, it's a saprophyte, and it lives in the soil until plant stress signals activated. That's what both Pythium and Rhizoctonia have in common. Many diseases show up when plants are stressed because plants can't mount a defense. But in particular, these two diseases, it's like they sense it. They have a means to sense it. Even Pythium, it smells what exudates. It's wild. And so they can sense when plants are stressed and they're giving off these smells, if you will, of weakness. The plants reek of weakness. That's not what we want. It's not what we want with our fields. And so, for instance, Rhizoctonia lives as a saprophyte in the soil until plant stress signals activate it. So a saprophyte, it breaks down dead plant material until plants become stressed, and then it can attack your plants, and it causes damping off, root rot, stem cankers, and crown lesions. It prefers compacted, low oxygen soils, guys, with residue to decompose. So like an old school method to get rid of some of these diseases would be burning crop residues. Because if there's no crop residues for it to live on, then, and also the thinking behind that is that fire, high heat can destroy the sclerotia. Of course, it can only destroy the sclerotia, at the surface level. And if you plow it under, those things, they're like little pebbles, will live for ages, years and years under there.
Mm-hmm.
It activates when there's changes, stress, ammonium dominance. Interesting side note, ammonium dominance in this one. And thrives where mitochondria and plant roots are weakened or low in oxygen. Pythium,
which
now
that's
I've seen
interesting to
Rhizoc.
note, though, back on Rhizoc with that. I wasn't specifically aware of that note of ammonium dominance. I think that's potentially some new information. Maybe not. But if root exudates are dominant in ammonium, and in parentheses it says stress, that's very interesting with what we've seen with the advent of plant sap analysis technology. Because when a plant is stressed and it's not photosynthesizing properly, and it's under a higher heat condition, trophobiosis takes place, or as what's his name, Francis Chaboso, with the book Healthy Crops, talks about trophobiosis and proteolysis. And so what he describes is when plants are under stress, they basically begin to break down complete proteins into simple proteins, or they break down complete amino acid chains, peptides, into free amino acids. And that process of essentially, for lack of a better term, the plant cannibalizing its own flesh, its own, nutrients to survive, produce that process, kind of like when you don't eat and you continue to exercise. After a while, your body quits burning glucose and starts burning fat and ketones. And so that's kind of what happens in plants when they become stressed and they don't have the metabolic energy or nutrients to continue to function and photosynthesize under stress. And so they begin to cannibalize themselves, and that process creates ammonium, which is very interesting. And so it's interesting that Rhizoctonia here is listed that it also activates when plant root exudates are become ammonium dominant, which means the plant's stressed. So it's producing and exuding and breaking down itself, which is creating ammonium as an off-gas material. And then Rhizoctonia goes, hey, this is what we like. Here's a stressed plant that's sick. Now we can infect it and take it out.
Yeah, that's good. We also know, too, that when environments, like compost or whatever, become kind of more anaerobic, those nitrogenous things break down, as you're saying, too, and often give off free ammonia. But it can also, it can serve as a warning, and you have cold, wet soils. You don't want to be perhaps using an ammonium nitrogen source either to kind of exacerbate that problem. For sure the takeaway in both of these is that they thrive where mitochondria in plant roots are weakened and low in oxygen. Which that's the common theme, low oxygen, which we know obviously when soils are waterlogged, you're going to have low oxygen. Pythium, an Oomycete water mold, not a true fungi. It produces zoospores. These things are nuts. It's bizarre. Produces zoospores that swim in water films. They have flagellate, they have mitochondria, they do chemotaxis, they can smell chemicals in the water, they can travel meters in the soil in waterlogged soils, which is pretty scary because it can spread quickly. Oftentimes, if you have maybe water running into your field, infections can come from there and run obviously in. They swim through the water. It's pretty nasty stuff. Cold, waterlogged soils. We had this in bananas here one year. It was terrible. And that was it. It was winter time. There was a confusion with some of the irrigation schedules, and we had overwatering. And boy, let me tell you, it flat knocked the bananas out. And it goes up through the roots, up and through the crown, and just rotted the central cigar leaf out in the plant. We treated it, and hey, we did see it come back, but not without taking a hit. It attacks weak, poorly lignified tissue, so it tends to affect new growth, and it dominates in soils with aerobic competition. So the environment that these diseases love: low oxygen, anaerobic pockets, tight soils. It thrives where water sits and oxygen drops, and it's the number one driver for pathogens. So, that being said, wouldn't we say that compaction, number one enemy? I mean, because we can't control high rainfall events, and we can't control temperatures, but we can control compaction. We can control compaction layers, soil aggregation, water infiltration rates. I mean, there's a number of things that are just obviously off the top of my mind. Thinking about, our irrigation water treatment system, which helps with water infiltration to remove compaction layers. You can look at targeted minimum till ripping. You can look at cover crops with taproots like sun hemp or radishes, etc., for breaking compaction layers and getting root exudates down there. Look at aerobic teas, applying aerobic teas, look at feeding beneficial biology, all these things to work against probably the number one issue, the biggest factor. Because if we have good infiltration, we have no compaction layer, the water can move. At least as soon as it ceases, it can be moving out. Drainage can be an issue. I mean, guys do address this in the Midwest. In a lot of places actually tiling. Here in the banana fields, we have drainage ditches. I've been told some of the highest rainfall areas in the world that have banana plantations, they pump more water. They have bigger pumps to pump water off their farm than they do to irrigate them when it's dry, because it can be such an issue. So you can look at tiling, things like that. Another one, excess ammonium and raw nitrogen. So high ammonium fertilizer shifts root exudates towards low sugar, amides, pathogen use. Ammonium suppress calcium uptake and create weak cell walls and easier entry. So, we talk about that all the time. If we're going to be using synthetic fertilizers, we really got to talk about what form and, the form and the time, how much, when. I think of oftentimes guys really like ammonium sulfate as a base fertilizer to put down. And, it's a favorite of guys growing corn. But, generally speaking, corn, we're growing it when it's warmer, but not always. You can get a downturn when temperatures drop, or beans. And, you don't want to be increasing your issue.
I think
Cold, wet soils.
And I know this kind of goes against what some of these notes here have on cold, wet soils. But unless we were mistaken and it wasn't Pythium, we had an experience one year when a farmer decided to jump on the hemp bandwagon and grow some hemp several years ago. And we believed it was Pythium at the time that was taking out some of these full-grown mature plants within like a day or two, which is something that Pythium does. But in that case, it was extremely hot environment. It was the opposite. And so they had black plastic down, irrigation underneath that plastic. Obviously, the plants weren't complete full canopy, so there wasn't complete shade on that black plastic. And you could stick your hand under the plastic in the dirt right there in the drip zone below those plants, and it would almost burn your fingers. It was so hot. And in that case, we saw Pythium just wipe out whole plants within a day or two. It'd look fine, and the next day it'd be like, oh, it doesn't look fine, and the next day it's dead. Which I thought was interesting. So I'm wondering if it's both ends, extreme cold or potentially extreme heat can potentially exacerbate that issue. But again, it still comes back to plant stress. If the soil's waterlogged, it doesn't have oxygen. In that case, you got black plastic. It's suffocating. There can't be gas exchange. It's soggy. Same base issues when it comes to oxygen.
I wonder if it's fusarium. Was fusarium, because fusarium can have. I mean, most of the time it's not so pathogenic, but it loves hot. Actually, does well when it's hot and humid. So I wonder.
It could be. It could be.
It could be any of these.
We weren't aware that fusarium would take out a big mature plant as tall as me, within a day and a half. Maybe it can under the right environment. I don't know.
And there are other
Pythium can just boom.
And there are other strains of Phytophthora too. So it could be that there's a heat-loving strain.
Yeah. You said Phytophthora. I was talking about Pythium.
Oh, sorry, Pythium. Yeah, Phytophthora is the other. Phytophthora fusarium, both can have similar to Pythium as well. I know when we were first with the bananas and we had it, thought we were dealing with Phytophthora, and then turns out it's Pythium. So it is tough because they can, without a diagnosis or without a test at a lab, it can be tough to determine exactly which one it is. The truth is, and that's what that's kind of what we're trying to do here in this series, is point out that the beauty of these diseases is they pretty much all share the common environmental issues. And so whether it's hot or cold, it's this or that, exactly. And that's the point. Like, I remember it's been a number of years ago now. I think it's been 4 or 5 years ago or something. And I wanted to brush up more on diseases. And so I bought a plant pathology book, thinking, okay, it's time to go back to school, get a college level plant pathology book. And I was just bogged down, man, overwhelmed. You talk about overwhelming. So many diseases, so many different, modes of action, this, that, the other. And no clear, patterns. It was so frustrating. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, it's so overcomplicated. And that was really, it might have even, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And then it really reinforced, again, my paradigm and method of dealing with diseases. Because if the common denominator of most of these diseases, are the environments, these conditions that make the disease. And so if we can create robust growing systems and we can support and be proactive, preventative with our practices, then we don't have to be experts in the disease. And when it happens, we have to prevent it. We really want to prevent it. There are some things you can do, even organic fungicides. Like we used a phosphite product as an organic fungicide to help, which does have a strong mode of action. And you can actually use it preventatively if you think, shoot, like it's cold, it's wet, I can't change that. You can actually apply it, and that can help. But what are some of the crops, that we see early signs that are most critical? Like one would be potatoes. It's a tough one because potatoes get root rot and tubers fail suddenly. The whole plant thing will just fold. Like you'll just start to see whole plants folding. Onions damping off. It's invisible underground. Soybeans, you can tell it's a little too late when it becomes pathogenic. But you can check when you pull your soybean plants or any beans for that matter. You can look at the stem right at the soil level. And before it becomes nasty, you'll start to see a little rusty color developing for Rhizoctonia, for instance. And that's where it's trying to eat its way into the side. Had a bad incidence in Rhizoctonia in cranberry beans. I think it was cranberry. And it was that, it was supposed to be warm weather, and it just turned cold and wet. And sure enough, terrible Rhizoctonia. Wheat, barley, you get rhizoc patches, corn, weak stands, bananas, slow onset, early root lesions, macadamia, nursery and young, roots, avocado, root dieback, before visible canopy decline. That's the tough thing about a lot of these. You definitely want to be very proactive because scouting is a challenge. It's mostly underground, you're going to start to see these things. But look, when it comes to how do we reduce the incidence. I mean, we reduce plant stress and change the environment.
Hmm.
And that's what we're doing with regenerative agriculture anyways. We focus on crop nutrition, we focus on soil health, and all of those things create suppression, really. Disease-suppressive soils. Oxygen is the ultimate fungicide.
Yep.
So we
And
need
in
good
an
roots.
irrigated system, probably from a product standpoint, the most effective thing that I have seen is the advent of the Rainbox AOP technology. In a
Totally.
non-irrigated system, you're limited, but in an irrigated system, it does. We've seen it do some pretty incredible things, and it's comes back to this whole thing of water filtration, compaction, pore space, oxygen.
Dissolved oxygen.
Yeah. And especially if you are getting some of these compounds coming in your irrigation water, like these zoospores, like in Pythium's sake. If you can oxidize that before it even hits the field, then you're already ahead of the game, which is awesome.
100%. Yeah. No, and we know that if we apply beneficial aerobic organisms prior to this, for instance, and we create an environment filled with beneficial soil organisms and other organisms that that compete against or eat, if you will, eat these, then we're working ahead of the game. I have to look. I'm not sure what the sclerotia are comprised of.
I believe they're a chitin shell as well.
Our sclerotia, I'm looking at it.
Which is why chitosan, again, is listed as one of the preventative compounds with all of these diseases.
It's quite interesting because if you look at the sclerotia on a potato, like it looks like there's just dirt stuck on it.
Good.
Yeah, you're right. Yep, sclerotia are primarily chitin-based structures. Outer shell is chitin and melanin. Interesting.
Yep.
That's why it's brown.
Yeah.
Melanin, a dark carbon-rich pigment that makes sclerotia black and protects it from UV microbes and oxidation. Wow, that's huge. Yeah, so there you have it. We know another reason why chitosan is so effective at so many diseases, and that's huge though. I mean, chitin and chitin degraders, which, our aerobic tea is loaded with chitin degraders in that soil, helping to break down organisms, creating the metabolites to break that stuff down. That's huge. So, I mean, continuous living roots is huge as well, having a cover crop in there to continually increase the breakdown and increase active soluble carbon, balanced mineral nutrition, calcium, obviously having appropriate calcium hardens those cell walls, silica strengthens roots against penetration. Our major micros, I mean, zinc, copper, manganese, to activate those defense systems. There are dozens of defense pathways that copper and zinc and iron are cofactors
Those enzymes
for.
that they produce are huge. Silica's so underrated.
Yeah, it is.
It's so incredible at giving the plant the ability to ward off and then if there is a damaged site or an infection site, that calcium silica combo can re-heal that site or wall off the cells behind the infection so that it can't penetrate further, which is incredible.
Yeah, something else that's interesting is, for instance, like using our chitin-rich. So in Soil Vigor, like we have a lot of chitin-based food source in there, and that chitin triggers the ISR, induced systemic resistance in plants, which create peroxidase as well, literally excreting peroxide basically through the roots. Yeah, in tree crop systems, there's an argument for having other beneficial crops and other beneficial trees in there, mixed cropping, because there are other trees and plants that tend to excrete a lot more peroxidase. So just another reason why it's nice to have more than just a monoculture. Chitin also, it weakens the Rhizoctonia hyphae and helps roots defend naturally.
There's so many organisms too that are powerful for controlling, or I shouldn't say control. You can't say control when you're talking about it's not a pesticide. We're talking about prevention, making things healthy. But yeasts, different types of bacillus, lactobacillus, those organic acids they produce. Lower pH, they can cause membrane disruption. Phenolic compounds, ethanol, are toxic to the zoospores, like in Pythium. Your Bacillus subtilis is one, but a lot of your Bacillus bacteria produce biosurfactants that can disrupt the zoospores and those membranes. There's so many different ones. Right. Trichoderma is a huge one when it comes to some of these diseases, because they can colonize the root surface and basically suppress it. And then obviously like what we do in some of our products is providing all of the food sources for those as well. So if you have humic substances, fulvic substances, biochar, all these different mineral colloids that provide soluble and stable carbon sources, that allows the beneficial bacteria, as well as increasing pore space in that soil, to increase your ability to have oxygen down there where you need it in the root zone. It provides a space for all of the other organisms to survive and thrive together. Mm-hmm. And when you get those oxygen-loving organisms down there, you suppress these pathogens because you're changing the environment. Everything always comes back to epigenetics. Changing the environment determines how genes are turned on and turned off. And so if you change the environment, you essentially change the outcome. You change what survives and what thrives. So
you mentioned, LAB, they actually produce antimicrobial peptides that inhibit zoomycetes. So, and it's amazing. It's commonly used in natural pathogen suppression in Japan and Korea. It's been used for centuries. Knowing that just knowing that, hey, when I use this, my fields are healthier. But actually, there's evidence to suggest it actually, the antimicrobial peptides produced by lactic acid bacteria directly inhibit the oomycetes. So again, we're not saying we controlled them in your field. We're just saying that when people put these two things together,
whether you apply them or whether you feed them, I think that's something that's really important. Is sometimes in specific cases, if we have a disease and we're really trying to control it, and hey, we don't want to use a synthetic fungicide that we know is going to wipe out other things and or have a toxic effect on the user or the consumer of that produce, which we know that's not popular, but it's true. If you dive into the research, these fungicides do not do good things to whoever eats that, whether it's a human or an animal. But in that case where we've got a major issue, yes, we might need to apply a concentration of a specific organisms to counter or suppress. But in most cases, all we need to do is change the environment and feed the soil.
Yep.
Because these organisms are there. Even when you fumigate, fumigation is we're trying to sterilize things. You can never sterilize it. They always come back. There's something survives, whether they go deep and then as it off gases, they come back, whether moisture dissipates some of those chemical compounds that are fumigating it. But regardless, soil is resilient. And so if we can feed it and put the right food sources down there, then boom, you have this growth. And so that's what we try to do most of the time is let's give this soil the environment based on the way that it's being treated from cover crops and humic substances, carbon, those types of things, to have the flocculation, the proper ratios of calcium to phosphorus and magnesium so that we can get more pore space to get oxygen in there. But then applying compounds such as pyroligneous acid and soluble carbon sources and chitosan sources and all these different foods to feed the organisms that we know need to proliferate and grow so that they can suppress the pathogens that are affecting and attacking our crops. So feeding them is as or more important than trying to add the specific organism is the point I'm trying to make.
You're so spot. Yeah, because most of them naturally occur, and most of the hydrolysates or products that we utilize, like in our soil vigor, have enough in there to serve as an inoculum if they're not already there. But they reproduce rapidly. But like you're saying, it's so important to, and that's why we don't, it's not a one note wonder. That's why we have so many ingredients. That's why we have chitin in there. That's why we have molasses and biochar and wood vinegar and all these other goodies.
And amino acids, and fulvic acids, and humic acids, acetic acids, and pyroligneous acids.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because if you take a DNA analysis of the soil, you're going to find tens of thousands of microbes, period. Yes, in some cases they've been beat up pretty bad, and so you might not find the ones you're looking for. You might not find very many, but in most cases something's there. It just needs taken care of. It needs nurtured.
Yeah, that's right. Well, guys, we hope you enjoyed this as we look, we're just trying to through this, what we hope you see is that these scary diseases, and they are, don't get me wrong, they will just take your crop down. That they are terrifying, but they're not something to have anxiety about, because if we create that's the beauty of regenerative agriculture. If we truly adhere to regenerative principles and we feed the soil so that the soil feeds the plant, and we do what we can to reduce plant stress, and we manage our residues, and we manage our water infiltration and all these things.
We don't over-till or over-apply fertilizers.
Exactly. We can be proactive, and then we don't have to be afraid that these things are going to show up. Does it mean they won't ever? No, it doesn't mean that. But it does mean the severity should be less, and it should mean that it doesn't happen as often. And we'll have a plan for that. We have a plan for what to do when these things show up as well. But really through this series, I'm hoping you'll see the power of soil vigor, which is kind of one of the base of our programs, because it's a prebiotic. It's about feeding soil microorganisms so they can break down the residue in your field where these pathogens might be hiding quicker with beneficial organisms, and it can support healthy soil microbiology and increase oxygen, increase water infiltration, increase all these things. So we create a healthy environment. Increase organic matter, increase soil organic matter, because when we increase soil organic matter, we know we have higher water holding capacity, which means there will be less likely to be waterlogged. We can absorb more water. We'll have greater aggregation, soil aggregation, so the water can pass through. And anyways, all these things, and we can control, the farm around us and have buffer strips. So when the farm water comes onto our farm, we can filter on the way in. And anyways, we hope you're enjoying this series. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let us know if you'd like to take a different direction with it, or rather just continue it in a different way. We're kind of getting to the end of it. I think we'll hit some pests too, because it's important to note that the same is true of pests. These pests for instance, insects that bother us, they don't show up for no reason. They've got sensilla and antennas, and they show up because something's changed in the plant. And if you want to know more about that, check out our videos from our conference last year. Dr. Tom Dykstra talks all about that. And even better yet, join us at our conference that's coming up in January. Dr. Tom Dykstra will be there again. Matt Powers will be there to talk about all this, soil microscopy and all these things that we're talking on. So, please go to our website, soilcraft.com, sign up. And, we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us, Trent.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us as we expand our paradigms and explore what's possible in the realm of regen agronomy. If you would like to contact us or learn more about what we do, please visit our website at www.soilcraft.com, as well as our YouTube channel. If you have topics you would like us to unpack or stories, please connect with us so that we can share them with others.